So when we're solving using quadratic formula, that's using the formula of x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, me personally, I usually find the discriminant before I even start solving because it makes it easier to plug than trying to plug it in and solve through the process. So, this first problem we have is 4n squared minus 9n plus 8 equals 3. So is this in standard form for quadratics?
No.
What needs to change? And so we have 4n squared minus 9n plus equals 0. So A is equal to
4.
B and C.
5.
There are going to be times in tonight's homework where one of those is going to be a 0. So if you don't have something times your x term, it's a 0 for B. If you don't have something times or with no variable, it's 0 for C. Now, we're going to plug in and find our discriminant. So step 1 is going to be finding that discriminant. B squared minus 4ac, what we did yesterday. And so B squared is going to be negative 81, or excuse me, is negative 9 squared minus 4 times 4 times 5. So we'd have 81 minus 80 gives us
1.
Now I'm going to use that information and I'm going to plug into x equals negative b. So that's opposite b. So b is negative, so that's going to be a positive 9. Plus or minus the square root of that 1 that we found there. All divided by 2 times my a, which in this case is 4. So my numerator is 9 plus or minus 1, and our denominator is 8. So what that means is we have one option where it's 9 plus 1 over 8, and one option where it is 9 minus 1 over 8. And so that means there's going to be 2 answers.
Does the 9 have to be negative since it's negative b?
Well, the b is negative 9.
Yeah.
So negative b is another way of saying opposite b.
Okay.
And so 9 plus 1 is over 8, which is 5/4. 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 divided by 8 is
4.
And so my solution, my final answer, is 1, 5/4.
How do you know which one goes first?
Doesn't matter. Typically you go least to greatest, and so if you're having troubles on the computer accepting the answer when we go to that format, it's going to be least to greatest. Let's do one more, and then I'm going to let y'all work. Actually, we're going to do two more. Sorry, I forgot there's another one I wanted to do. And so, first let's write down the first problem is 7x squared minus 8x minus 18 equals negative 11. And so let's identify A, B, and C. Can we? No, why?
Because there's 11
Oh, so we have to get the 11 over. And so that leaves us with 7x squared minus 8x minus 7 equals 0. Now can I identify A, B, C?
Yes.
So A is, B is,
-8,
and C is.
-7.
And so what do I do next?
Find your b squared minus 4ac.
So we find our discriminant, b squared minus 4ac. So b squared is negative 8 squared minus 4 times 7 times a negative 7. And so that gives us 64 minus, and that's going to end up being minus and negative, so I'm going to go ahead and change that to positive. And
49 times
which is?
4
Oops.
6, 96.
And so we end up with 196, and 64 times, or 64 plus 196 is what?
260.
And so now we're going to use this number to help us. And so let's go over and we're going to solve x equals negative b. So what does that mean in this case? Positive 8 because it's opposite b. Plus or minus the square root of 260 divided by 2 times a, which in this case is 7. Well, remember back on Monday, we talked about the square roots and pulling things out. So let's look at 260. And is there anything that I can pull out of 260 and simplify that square root?
2.
2, leave me 130.
2.
Leaving me 65.
5.
Leaving me 13. Is 13 prime? Okay, is there any sets?
2.
I have a set of 2's. And so I'm going to rewrite this. 8 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 5 times 13, which was 65. All divided by 14. Are all my coefficients divisible by the same number? I'm going to divide the same number into each of these numbers. Are they all divisible by 2?
Oh, yeah.
It has to go to every single term having that same divisible. And so it has to be the number outside the square root. Okay? What it's based upon is the idea that we can do this. I'm not going to make you separate it like this, but that's the reason this works, okay? So they're all divisible by 2. And so if I divide each of those numbers by 2, 8 becomes a 4. 2 becomes a 1. and 14 becomes a 7. And so I can rewrite my answer as 4 plus or minus the square root of 65 divided by 7. Now, the last problem, I went ahead and split it apart into the positive and negative one and solved. If I did that here, would I get non-decimal numbers? No. So this is the answer you get to leave it with. Anytime there's a square root, you get to leave it in that form.